Hey folks, Mike McFarland here, the Lake Fork Guide. I'm sitting in my corner, and today, I thought what I would do. It's winter, and it's comfortable in my garage here, but it's not comfortable outside. And so what I thought I would do is I thought I'd dig up a little bit and talk to you about some of my favorite winter type baits, okay? So the first one we're going to talk about is my favorite hard baits, okay? And again, winter on fork, shallow water, hard baits, all right? I'm not going to talk to you about warm trend, cold trends, and things like that because those are more important than the baits that we choose to throw. The warm trend and cool trend depends on where, it really helps you decide where the fish are. And location is everything. But generally, when we're fishing shallow water, it's because we believe the fish have come up out of the creeks, out of the deeper water, warm trended water, sunbathing, etc. In the real cold of winter, my most favorite, probably top 3, maybe 4 baits are in this order. Lipless crankbait, rattle trap, okay, Squarebill, and in the cold of winter, I prefer the more flatter sides, the better. Not always, but in most cases. Jerkbaits. And a final, and this is Lake Fork specific, is a special chatterbait in one color only. I just don't fish the chatterbait all winter long. I guess you could probably do it in black and blue, but this is a special deal. We're going to talk about it, okay? So now let's go through those baits. Lipless crankbaits. I generally want to go with a 1/2 ounce, okay? I want to fish these on the flats. I want to fish these in warm trended water, in pockets where maybe that sun has spent the whole day shining and the south wind has blown that warmer water into that shallow flat or that shallow pocket where there's vegetation, preferably grass, hydrilla. That's where I'm going to find the best success with the rattle trap, okay? Now, generally, little by little, the grasses are being taken away from us in these lakes. They're being sprayed and removed. Which still makes this bait, which makes this bait less effective, but it's still a very effective bait. You don't have to have vegetation, okay? What I really want out of this is a couple different things. Again, first, I'm normally throwing a 1/2 ounce. Sometimes I may go to heavier. If I go to heavier, it's because I need to fish it faster, and I'm simply looking for a reaction strike out of these fish. If they're up shallow on a flat, they're warm trending, and they're not really feeding up there, but they're warm trending, so they're feeling a little better. They may be willing to snap at the bait, and that's where I would go a little heavier. Okay? Generally, in the wintertime, if they're feeding, I go smaller. And the reason is feeding bass, if they'll eat smaller bites, smaller bits, it digests easier than one big bulk. Now, I'm not telling you that a big 10-pound bass on Lake Fork won't eat a big old gizzard shad in the cold winter, because they do. But you'll get more bites by downsizing just a little bit if you're on feeding fish. So if we have 2 or 3 days in a row, they're really warm trending, they're really feeding, I might go down to the lighter version on the rattle trap or lipless crankbait, okay? Most importantly, though, as you're going to hear me say with all 3 of these baits, is some kind of contact must exist. If I'm throwing this through the wood, then it has to bounce and skip off some of the timber. If I'm throwing this in grass, it has to catch up in the grass and break free from the grass. If I'm throwing it over the tops of the grass, for example, it has to fall down and just kick the tops of the grass, okay? It has to have some contact. Even in the dirt, in do-nothing banks, a rattle trap or a lipless crankbait can catch fish. Let it have contact with the bottom of that dirt just a little, every now and then. Let it hit the shell. Slow it down, speed it up. Slow it down, speed it up, okay? Traps, lipless crankbaits in the winter are super effective because they get the reaction strike. Okay, they get the bite when the fish doesn't even want to eat, but it reacts. Okay, that's all we're talking about. Let's talk about colors. Obviously, always match the hatch. If you're on clear water lakes, it's going to change. We're going to keep this specific to Lake Fork. You have your basic shad colors. I like a silver blue back. That's always good. Cloudy conditions, I'm almost always going to go to a black and gold. And since we're talking about winter, in the winter time, you got to have something red, sand raven red, This one I think is called green tomato, so it's got a little chartreuse, a little red, a little black back, solid red, chili bowl red. And the reason is our brim, our big sunfish, multi-species of sunfish throughout the world, but they're the specific brim that we have, sungill they call it, pumpkin seed, turns real orange and red in the winter. They turn pink in the summer, almost pumpkin seed color, but in the winter in the cold water, that bull brim is really orangish, reddish. So are our crawfish. Sometimes they're black and red. So moreover in the winter, anyone who lives in Texas, they know this. You're going to have your dark orange colors, okay? So that should cover the colors on the trap. What do I throw that on? All right, I throw the trap. I really throw the trap straight up on braid. All right, especially if I'm in grass. I throw it on 40-pound braided line. I throw it on a 7-to-3 gear ratio Daiwa Tatula 150, and I throw it on a real-time rod, FS 7'8", 1225. That's basically a fast tip. Okay, it's a reaction rod. It's not really a cranking rod, but it's got a fast tip, but a little bit of parabolic to it. That's really what you want. So almost really a medium fast tip, let's call it. If you're looking at Bass Pro Shops at just a general line of rods for a trap, you want a medium fast tip. Okay, you want it to have enough tip that you're really feeling that thump and the vibration. You feel it contact whatever it's contacting, so that you can immediately pull and rip it off. And you want immediate response. So you don't want a slow tip. Medium fast is going to work. I like basically my real-time rods because it's made just for it. But the real-time FS 7'8", 1225 handles the trap awesome. 40-pound braid. I didn't talk about where to fish. I kind of did. The banks of the creeks, the flats. I'm not going to throw this down in deep water. I'm not going to throw this on a channel swing into a bunch of wood and try and fish in 12 feet of water. Okay, I'm just not. Most of the time, I'm fishing these traps in less than 4 or 5 feet of water, maybe even less than 1. In 0 to 1, 0 to 2 is where I'm going to get bites. Some of the biggest fish of the year are caught on this color in 6-8 inches of water every December, January. Okay? It's a sunbathing fish, the largemouth bass. Squarebill is going to have a little bit different action. All right, the Squarebill is going to generally allow me to even slow down a little bit more. So maybe I just can't get the reaction bite out of those fish. I can't get them to snap. I can't get them to react like I want with the lipless crankbait. I want to still have some good noise and action. I want to stir the bottom a little more with this. So I'm going to make sure that I'm having bottom contact, certainly wood contact, bouncing off wood. And that's what the lipless doesn't do as well as a Squarebill. So potentially, I found fish, they're in the trees, and the lipless crankbait is hanging up a whole lot. I may go ahead and go to the Squarebill now, because that Squarebill is going to deflect and bounce off a little better through the wood. Or maybe I find some fish on a shallow shell bed, and I want to actually dig and contact the shell, and it's hard to do it with a rattle trap or lipless, so I go to a Squarebill. Okay, also feeding fish, very important. I tend to keep it small with the Squarebills. I want to keep a narrow, the more narrow and flat-sided. I want shallow divers and fork specific. I want these kind of crazy colors, these black and chartreuses, and or even some of the oranges and the sungill colors, the same thing that we talked about in the traps. Okay, so that's bait number 2 is going to be the Squarebill. Very important, great search bait. So folks, now let's talk about what kind of rod, reel, and line that I throw the Squarebill on. Okay, on a Squarebill now, I'm going to throw it on monofilament line. All right, I choose 20-pound monofilament. On Lake Fork, I never know when that big fish is going to bite, so I'm always wanting to be prepared. The Mason, M-A-S-O-N, bass on 20-pound is perfect. I can throw a tiny little Squarebill with it, 1.5, or I can throw a 10XD crankbait on it. It's awesome line, abrasive resistant. I'm going to fish that Squarebill through the wood and through the junk. The line can handle it. The line's the most important thing to handle that abrasive conditions that I'm going to put this bait in. So 20-pound monofilament. I want a little stretch. On the rod, you want a medium tip now. It's like a cranking rod. The reason is that bait's moving through the water, and the fish, you don't want to pull it out of their mouth. Okay. You also want to have just a little easy deflection, and I'm looking for a reason to stop. So my signature rod is actually the CB 7'10", and I'm going to throw it on a 1530. That's a 6 power. That is a huge, heavy rod. Believe it or not, the real-time rod, CB 7'10", 1530 with 20-pound monofilament can throw this tiny little 1.5 all day long. Okay. Real gear ratio, I run Daiwa 150s with a 6.3. I want to slow that reel down just a little bit. You can overfish a Squarebill. A lot of times you can make it flare and they won't eat it as much or at all. I only want to make it flare when it deflects off of a stump. I don't want to make it flare because I'm reeling it so fast. Okay, so Daiwa Tatula 150 with a 6.3 gear ratio. That gets it done for me on the Squarebills. Bait number 3, we'll go ahead and talk about the secret bait. I think this works better in warmer water, no ifs, ands, or buts. But if I throw this bait on a warm, trended day when the sun gills are up shallow, sunbathing, so are the bass, this can be really deadly in cold winter water. Sand Raver and Lake Fork, it's no secret that the sun gill color, again, the browns, oranges, reds, in the wintertime are deadly. This would be the only chatterbait I would throw. Some others may say a black and blue chatterbait will get you bit in the dirtier water, winter and stuff, but I have a theory that we'll talk about a little later on. I think a chatterbait works best in 58-degree water and above. But anyways, chatterbait, bait number 3. I think we're going to close here for hard baits. Bait number 4. Man, it's not my specialty. Patrick Walters just showed us how deadly a jerkbait can be. But jerkbaits. Jerkbaits in the winter, man, this really should be my number 1 choice. This is the most effective way to fish for cold, lethargic fish. As far as throwing hard baits, meaning non-soft plastics. If you're looking for a reaction bite, there's almost no better way. You get good with the jerkbaits, okay? And you can really, really find some great success when the water's cold. There's a lot of scenarios that'll happen. Number 1, everything we just discussed with the rattle trap and Squarebill, this also can be fished in the same places. You'll notice I'm still family of colors. Shad colors if I'm on shad, matching the hatch, the size. But of course, if I'm fishing shallow water on fork, that black, orange, and gold is hard to beat. Okay, sizes I just mentioned is very important to match the hatch. If you're on some big, giant gizzards, you may want the larger jerkbait. Most probably important thing for me, and again, I'm not the best jerkbait fisherman. I'm rounded about it, and I understand it pretty well. But you want suspending jerkbaits this time of year. They have to suspend, which means when you're working and when you stop, it does not float back up. It suspends at wherever it was and stalls. The most important part of that suspension is that it actually sits nose down just a tiny bit. And even sometimes we'll just have the beginnings of a slow sink. Not much. I don't want it to sink, but just appear like it wants to just, it's dying, okay? So it's zipping through the water, pow, 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 and then it stalls and has a dying presentation. You can purchase them already on the package. It'll say suspending jerkbait. Sometimes there's a scenario where you want the floating. If you're in the wood and you're contacting the wood, if you'll jerk, contact the wood and give some slack back, the bait will float back up and you can work through the heavy cover. So you may want one bait that's floating and one bait that's suspending. And I got a little trick for you. We're going to close this out now. I'll give you a summary. I sometimes just get the floating, and then I will add these little stickum weights. Okay, you got round and different lead. This is made by Storm. There's multitudes of different types of baits, but you add these little stickum weights, stickum lead weights, and in the water you'll test it before you use it. But you add those little stickum weights to create the suspension that you want. All right, and now you don't have to buy 2 different types of baits. You don't have to keep 2 different types of baits separate. They're going to look the same, but not act the same. So, man, you want to save yourself some money? Get yourself some of the stickets, get yourself the regular jerk baits, and make them suspend yourself, okay? That's the whole thing I'm going to close you with. Jerk baits are best anytime the fish are lethargic. Whether it be summer, the heat of summer, with a colder winter. They're going to be naturally by most fishermen used and sought more in the wintertime months, but jerkbaits catch them all year long. So the last two major events on Lake Fork, the BASS Elite, jerkbaits played a massive part, and in fact, all of the part in 2020. Brandon Cobb, and I think 2019 it was, he won with a lot of fish that came on jerkbaits, topwaters. That was in May. Okay, that was springtime. November, we just had Patrick Walters tear them up with suspending jerkbaits. Okay, these are shallow divers. You can go all the way down deep. On Fork, you're going to lose a lot, so you won't see me doing that. But okay, guys, let's talk about what kind of rod, reel, and line that I choose to throw the jerkbait on. Okay, unlike the others, the jerkbait must have fluorocarbon line. If I have floating line, it's going to affect that suspension that we talked about. That's so important. So I'm going to choose fluorocarbon line. Anything from a 15 to a 20-pound fluorocarbon line is going to work, depending on the size of the jerkbait I'm using. If I'm going to be using a tiny little jerkbait, I'm probably going to have to go down to 15-pound tests to make it castability, and to make the bait actually do what it needs to do in the water. But the most important thing on the line is I never, ever, ever throw a suspending jerkbait on anything other than fluorocarbon line. All right? Basically, just like the rattle trap rod, I want that fast tip. I really want it. I don't want to have the bait pulled out of the fish's mouth, so I don't want too fast of a tip, but I do want that moderate fast tip so that when I'm working the bait, it's now. There's not as much of a pause. Okay, so also got to remember that a lot of these times I'm going to be fishing this in some heavy timber. I'm going to be, these fish will suspend in the tops of these trees, sunbathe. They can be 6-8 feet deep when it's not good, or down at the bottom of the creek at 30 feet when it's no good. And when the sun's shining, they rise in the water column all the way up to the tops of the trees out in open water and sunbathe. Okay, so I'm going to have a lot of contact. It's really important that I feel that bait. Okay, so what I choose to throw it on is actually kind of like a worming rod, believe it or not. It might be a little different, but that's what I do. I throw it on the MB 7'3", 1225 with a Daiwa Taptula 150, 7.3 gear ratio, 20-pound fluorocarbon. Try that for your jerkbaits on Lake Fork, and you'll be surprised at how that'll work. Okay. Quick summary again. My top four, aside from this guy, aside from the Alabama rig, which I'm not going to talk about because we just did a show about it, but the Alabama rig would really realistically be my most number one choice because it's a spinnerbait on steroids. I can throw this all day long and I will connect. Okay, somewhere along the lines I will connect, and I'll connect good. But anyways, summary: lipless crankbaits, squarebills, jerkbaits, and a sun-gill colored chatterbait. Wow. Well, the reason is this is one of the old Phoenix chatterbaits, and my mind was thinking Phoenix, but these aren't for sale anymore. So you're gonna have to look for the height craw, the B height craw. I think there's a height or anything hot craw in the jackhammer, but you just want those brown and oranges. So enough rambling. That's the hard baits that I would throw on Fork in the cold of winter. I'm Mike McFarland, the Lake Fork Guide. Thanks for watching.